President Joe Biden plans to announce a government review of U.S. supply chains. The goal is to end the country's reliance on China and other competitors for crucial goods. The issue has taken on renewed urgency with a global chip shortage that's delaying auto production at some U.S. factories. General Motors President Mark Royce spoke to Bloomberg News last week about the chip shortage and its effect on the auto industry.
I think the pandemic really didn't help a lot of our chip suppliers who do a great job in normal conditions, and they run right to our supply and forecasts and our scheduling. And when the pandemic hit, and we brought, the whole industry brought all the factories down. A lot of that supply was still going into, was shifted, frankly, probably into the consumer electronics piece of that. And the thought was that the auto industry isn't going to maybe recover as fast as some of the other industries.
And joining us now to discuss the government review and the ongoing chip shortage is Bloomberg News reporter Anna Edgerton in Washington. Anna, it's been a little bit. Thank you for being here. So tell me, what do we know about the order Biden is signing today first?
So this is really aimed at some of the supply chain concerns that the chairman there of General Motors mentioned, and that other companies have mentioned as well. We saw that illustrated really starkly at the beginning of the pandemic, when it was hard to get the personal protective equipment that people needed to stay safe from the coronavirus. So you see how it's a national security issue. It's a serious concern for American companies and citizens to rely on other countries, to deliver parts of their supply chain.
You know what I wonder, though, Anna, can you put into perspective just how much the United States depends on China and other countries for our raw goods and other materials?
Yeah, it depends on the industry, and a lot of the really key industries that we're looking at have parts of their supply chain outsourced to foreign countries. Things like technology and cars and other commodities are sourced from abroad, which makes it really difficult for the United States to be self-reliant. And in a globalized economy, it's really hard to dial that back, and that's something that we're seeing in some of the policy initiatives, both from the White House and on Congress, that, it's okay to talk about the problem and what needs to happen, but actually putting that into practice is really difficult to achieve in the short term.
Now, how feasible is it for the U.S. to be able to manufacture some of its own products? And is it a timeline on when that's possible? I just wonder how difficult is it for that to happen?
Well, it's hard, and part of the problem is the set of policy tools that we have to work with. Biden's order that he signed this morning talks about some of the incentives that could be put into place, like tariffs and other credits for American companies. But it's really hard to kind of create those market conditions when there are differences between countries in terms of labor force and production costs, and those are hard to overcome just with policy from Washington.
Okay. Now, Anna, can you tell us about this urgency to address the semiconductor issue in automobile manufacturing companies?
Yeah, it's not just automobiles, although that certainly is a big concern, especially when you look at the jobs that could be lost there if those plants aren't running at full production. It's also creeping into some of the technology production. Some of the biggest American companies are worried about sourcing the parts they need to make their products. So that could be a huge concern heading into the next few years as the economy tries to bounce back from the pandemic. The last thing we need is a headwind on supply chains when we're trying to pump so much fiscal stimulus into the economy to deal with the coronavirus.
Anna, I wonder, how are congressional leaders responding to Biden's plans to review the supply chain? We know that there are some efforts already going in Congress to address this.
Yeah, there were a few initiatives already underway. The Chips for America Act was introduced by Michael McCall, a Texas Republican, last year, and has been reintroduced in this Congress. So he's really taking the lead in the House, along with John Cornyn, a Texas Republican, in the Senate. And we saw some of those lawmakers, both Democrats and Republicans, at the White House today talking about this issue with President Biden. So you can see that there is a lot of bipartisan agreement on this, at least in talking talking about the problem, whether that bipartisan agreement extends to coming up with a solution really remains to be seen.
It does remain to be seen. And so there's also going to be a 100-day review that'll lead to financial incentives, tariffs, or possibly changes in procurement policies. Any idea of what types of financial incentives could be involved?
There were some tax credits that were mentioned in Michael McCall's legislation and some different ways to structure the market to encourage manufacturing here in the United States. But that's going to be, like I said, it's hard for Washington policy to create those conditions for that to be a good business decision. We see competition from abroad, especially when you get to a country like China that already has 17 semiconductor chips underway, whereas the United States is building just one currently in Arizona. So, already at a deficit and trying to make that up and kind of reverse some of the manufacturing outsourcing that's happened over the past several decades.
Anna, really interesting stuff looking at our supply chain. Thank you so much for joining us.
The biggest stories the moment they happen from around the globe. Subscribe to Bloomberg Quick Take now for insight in an instant.